So here is the rule. Your first draft is allowed to be ugly, but it is not allowed to remain imaginary. If your first draft is beautiful, I don't trust it, because a first draft has one job, and that job is not to impress anybody. Its job is to exist. But it doesn't, does it? And I know exactly what kind of private hell this is. I know what it feels like to carry a perfect book in your head and then watch it come out on the page sounding awkward, flat, clumsy, and embarrassingly human. I know what it feels like to think, oh no, this is terrible. Maybe I'm terrible. Maybe this whole dream was a mistake. The ugly first draft is not the problem. The imaginary perfect book is the problem. That perfect book in your head is gorgeous because it costs you nothing. It has never had to survive a sentence. It has never had to become a scene. It has never had to reveal the plot hole, the weak character, the dialogue that sounds like two mannequins arguing in a dentist's office. The real draft is ugly because the real draft is alive. And alive things are messy. The first draft is supposed to be ugly because the first draft is where you find out what you're actually trying to say. You don't discover that by thinking about writing. You don't discover it by buying another notebook. You don't discover it by building a playlist, researching character names, adjusting the font. You discover it by making a mess. There is no clean way into a book. Believe me, I wish there were. I wish the story could arrive polished and obedient. I wish the words would line up in the right order because I have suffered enough. And surely the universe could reward me with one elegant paragraph. But that is not how writing works. Writing is not transcription from the gods. Writing is excavation. You dig up the thing and it comes out covered in dirt. Then you clean it. But you cannot clean what you don't dig up. This is why editing too early is so dangerous. It feels responsible. It feels disciplined. It feels like you are maintaining standards. But sometimes what you call standards is just fear wearing a false nose and sunglasses. You tell yourself, I just want this chapter to be good before I move on. But what you may really mean is, I am terrified of finding out what happens if I keep going. Because moving forward means the draft gets bigger. The problems get bigger. The gap between the book in your head and the book on the page gets harder to ignore. So you stay in chapter 1. That is avoidance. And I say that with love because I have done it. I have sat with the same opening, the same scene, the same few pages, convincing myself I was working when I was actually circling the work. I was making the beginning prettier because I was afraid of the middle. I was afraid the story would fall apart. I was afraid I would fall apart. I was afraid the draft would prove something terrible about me. But an ugly draft does not prove you are a bad writer. It proves you have the guts to write, to produce the first draft that will eventually become the book you hold in your hand. Nobody walks onto the construction site for a new home and says, "This isn't a house. What kind of builders are you?" No one would do that because they know that building a house takes time crafting every detail, from the plumbing to the electrical, to the walls, to paint colors, to trim, to faucets. You get the idea. A first draft is a house under construction where there's barely more than a few studs and concrete. It is supposed to have exposed beams. It is supposed to have weird gaps. It is supposed to have notes to yourself in brackets that say things like, fix this later, research this, or something emotional happens here, probably. That is not failure. That is the job. The problem is that writers keep judging construction site work by showroom standards. You are standing in the mud, holding a hammer, wondering why it doesn't look like a finished house. Because it is not a finished house. It is a beginning. So here is the rule. Your first draft is allowed to be ugly, but it is not allowed to remain imaginary. You do not have to make it beautiful today. You do not have to make it clever. You do not have to make it publishable. You do not even have to make it good. But you do have to make it real, because a bad page can be fixed. A blank page can only accuse you. And maybe that sounds harsh, but you know exactly what I mean. The blank page sits there with all that possibility, and somehow possibility can feel more punishing than failure. At least failure gives you something to work with. At least an ugly paragraph can be moved, cut, rewritten, clarified, or completely replaced. The blank page gives you nothing except the fantasy that maybe tomorrow you'll be braver. But bravery usually shows up after the sentence, not before it. So here is your next step. Open the draft. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Write the ugliest version of the next scene you can stand to write. Not the best version, not the final version, not the version that proves you're brilliant. The ugly version. The I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it anyway version. The I hate this paragraph, but now it exists version. That is how the book gets written. Not by waiting until you feel like a real writer. By making pages that look nothing like the dream and refusing to treat that as a crisis. Your first draft is supposed to be ugly. Let it be ugly. Then keep going.